Chapter 13. Rapture Detention, 1956. Sullivan was worried about Head Constable Harker. The HC was breathing through his mouth like a man who'd just finished a 2-mile run, but Sullivan knew damn well he'd been sitting at that desk for at least half an hour. One of Harker's cigars, still smoking, was just a butt in the seashell ashtray. Harker was sat there, panting, staring into space, drumming his freckled fingers on the desk. The head constable was a short, thick, jowly man with receding red hair and a shabby black suit. Looked like he hadn't shaved in a couple of days. "You asked me to come over, Harker, remember?" Sullivan said, sitting across from him. "You okay? You look kind of worse for wear." "Sure, I'm okay. Harker reached up, unconsciously fingering the constable badge on his lapel. "I just sometimes wonder," he glanced at the door to make sure it was closed, "if I made a mistake coming to Rapture." Sullivan chuckled. "Don't feel like the Lone Ranger on that one. Don't know how many who don't feel that way sometimes." Harker nodded, too rapidly. "But there's still some true believers, Chief, like Rizzo, Wallace, Ryan, of course, that crackpot Santa Cohen, maybe McDonough, 'cause we lost two, like Greavy." Harker sighed. "Damn shame about Greavy, too confident, strutting around like he owned the place. They nearly got Bill McDonough, too." "I don't know. I don't have a good feeling about it, Chief. I'm grateful you got me to the post, but I should have stuck in the States and, I don't know, gone into something else." "Me and you were badges, pal. Too old to change." He could see Harker was scared, plenty scared. "What is it? I mean, there's something that's got you off balance here. Something in particular. Why'd you call me over here?" Harker rubbed a thumbnail raspily over his 2 days' growth of beard and reached into the desk drawer. He took out a pistol, stood up, stuck the pistol in his coat pocket, and said, "I'll show you. Come on." They went into the corridor. Karlowski was waiting out there, a pump shotgun in his hands. Sullivan kept the Russian close when the great man didn't need him. Yesterday, that pump shotgun had to cut a spider splicer nearly in half and save Sullivan's neck. Karlowski nodded at Harker, who just grunted and brushed past him, stomping down the hall in his short, thick legs, one hand in his coat pocket on the gun. The head constable led them around the corner, past a black guard who unlocked the hallway door to let them into the cell block. They strode past a series of insulated, locked cells. All on the left-hand side were splicers, low enough on Eve to be containable, babbled and begged for their plasmids. A feral-looking woman, her face etched with plasmid lesions, spat at them through a barred cell door window as they passed. This place was grimier and crazier than Persephone. The isolation facility wasn't full of splicer crazies anyhow, just political eccentrics. At last Harker stopped near cell 15, where a hulking constable with nervous blue eyes and a leering smile leaned on the hallway's metal wall, a Tommy gun cradled in his arms. "Howdy, Chief," Cavendish said. "A little over an hour ago," Harker said in a low voice as Sullivan and Karlowski caught up with him on the cell door. "We bring in an unconscious splicer, right? Half naked, a lot of plasmid deformities on his face and all. Well, when we found this cocksucker, he had some kind of fish-gutting hook in one hand, all covered with blood. In the other hand, he has a woman's head. Her head, cut off her body, you get me? Sliced off just under the chin. Slick as a whistle. A brunette. Might have been a pretty woman. Think maybe I saw this chippy dancing over a strip joint in Fort Frolic." He licked his lips, glanced down the hall towards cell 18. "Oh, this splicer, he's kind of squeezing her head to his chest. Looked like a kid hooking a baby doll. And she was sawing logs, this guy, snoring. Pat Candavish here gives him cuffed and tried to wake him up, but guy's too stacked out. So Patrick gets some help, brings the son of a bitch up here, pulls him into cell 17 over there. We got the broad's head in the freezer in case you want an idea." "Okay," Sullivan said, shrugging. "Not only the homicidal splicer we've had. Pretty crazy, but lots of them are. He must have run out of Eve, got tired. Plasmas need recharging, took a snooze. Now you got him. Ryan's talking about turning guys like this over to Gil Alexander for his Experiments. We'll get him to a judge in the morning. Cavendish gave out a snickering sound of contempt. Well, have you got it wrong? Sullivan didn't like Cavendish's tone, but he didn't like Cavendish at all. One of the bad eggs, half Irish, half Suffolk Brit, grinned like a wolf, liked to beat up prisoners, but a good man in a fight. He ain't run out of anything, Cavendish went on. Drank himself to sleep. I figure that's what it smelled like. Woke up still charged. He was 18 last I looked. What do you mean, last you looked? There's a new plasmid on the market, Harker put in, almost whispering, eyes darting to the door of 18. Only it's kind of a black market. Fontaine hadn't released it publicly. It's supposed to make them extra crazy in record time, for one thing. For another, might be the most dangerous one around, if you only think about it. Only I figure these guys are probably too nuts to use it against the council. They're all about going with their impulses. Use what? Goloski asked impatiently. They can disappear, Harker said, and go somewhere else. This guy, he comes in and out that cell as he pleases, Pat. What do they call that plasmid? Teleport. At that moment, a sucking sound made them look towards cell 18. Specks of free-floating blackness appeared in the air. Sparkles of energy took on the approximate shape of a man, and the sound increased till it ended in a shoop, as a man appeared out of nowhere. He was a pale man, barefoot, naked from the waist down, wearing only a filthy blood-stained work shirt. His hair was patchy and brown. The angular face was hard to make out under all the plasmid eccentricities. One of the growths had nearly blotted out his left eye. Hey, dog humpers, keep me awake out here, he snarled, spraying spittle past his snaggly yellow teeth. I'm trying to finish my nap, for fuck's sake. Well, ain't you little pips with your pretty badges? I want me one. Goloski, Cavendish, Harker, and Sullivan were all bringing their guns to bear, a Tommy gun, a shotgun, and 2 pistols pointed at an empty space. Empty because the splicer had teleported out of it. He still had plenty of Eve in him. He had vanished and reappeared behind Karlowski. He pulled Karlowski's hair, hooting gleefully, and as the Russian spun toward with the shotgun, the splicer vanished again, twinkling away, only to reappear, bringing a nasty smell and posing like a dancer between Sullivan and the wall, yanking Sullivan's right ear and cackling, "Hiya, Chief." Bastard acts like one of them cartoons in the movies, Sullivan thought. He made a grab for the splicer and felt his fingers pass through air that crackled with departing energy. He turned to see the splicer grabbing the pistol from Harker with one hand, the other tearing at the constable's badge off. Sullivan got his pistol into play and fired at the splicer, squeezing the trigger for a split second too late. The bullet passed through the place where the teleporter had been, ricocheting off the steel walls near Harker. The sucking sound came again, and a flash of light came from cell window of 18. Harker made a plaintive little eep sound, a noise you'd never expect from him. Then he gasped as he slid down the wall, leaving a smear of blood. He fell on his face, squirming, groaning. The ricochet from Sullivan's gun had hit the constable, and hard. "Damn it, Harker," Sullivan sputtered, as if it were Harker's fault. "I'm sorry, I just..." Harker grasped again. "Get the fucker." Tommy gun raised, Cavendish was stalking toward the window of cell 18. He peered through the small barred window and the studded metal door, and his head jerked back with a bang of a gunshot from inside. Sullivan thought at first Cavendish was dead, but then he saw the constable was just missing part of his left ear, much of it shot away. Cavendish crouched down in the corridor, put a hand over his red streaming ear, hissing with pain. "Fuck!" A tee-hee-hee came inside the cell. "Too bad I missed. Could have improved your ugly fucking face to have a bullet hole in it, dog humper. I gotta recommend that one to Steinman." Sullivan cocked his pistol, moving in a half crouch down a row of cells. He ignored the bearded splicer in number 16 who taunted, "You see, if you'd given us our Adam, we'd be happy harpies, but now, right now, you made us into saddy sotties, and sadness hurts, and hurts. It's going to hurt and hurt." "It's me that's done the hurting so far today," Sullivan thought glumly. He'd accidentally shot Harker. This teleport thing had him shaken. He saw now why Harker had been so unnerved. He approached the cell door obliquely, pistol raised, trying to peer in without making himself a target. There, the semi-nude splicer was relaxing on his back in a cot against the farther wall of the padded room, his naked genitals splattered with dry blood, all too clearly on display. He had his left arm behind his head, his right arm up. He was spinning the pistol on his index finger and singing a Rapture advertising jingle to himself. Oh, the beer may be green, but it's mighty keen. It satisfies the man, makes him feel grand. It's Ryan's own beer. On beer, the splicer stopped spinning the gun and fired it toward the barred window of the cell. The bullet struck a bar and ricocheted down the corridor. Sullivan ducked, though the bullet was already on its way by then. He raised slowly up, only to hear that sucking sound and Cavendish yelling, "Down, Chief!" He flattened belly down on the floor and saw, out of the corner of his eye, the splicer materializing over him to his right, the pistol pointed down to shoot him in the head. A rat-a-tat echoed harshly in the corridor, along with the big thump of a shotgun, and the splicer was stumbling backward, stitched across the middle with blood spouting bullet holes, right arm torn in half from a shotgun blast. Cavendish had gotten him square with the Tommy gun, and Karlowski had clipped him with the shotgun. Someone around the corner yelled in pain as part of the Tommy gun burst ricocheted down the corridor. Maybe the steel walls hadn't been such a good idea. Sullivan got up again, coughing with the gun smoke in the small space. Jips and jeers and sounds of derision came from the adjoining cells, but the teleport splicer was twitching, gurgling in death. "Well, we got him, but we lost Harker," Sullivan muttered, turning to look at the dead constable. "This is all new, how you say it, from baseball," Karlowski said, looking down at the twitching splicer. Sullivan nodded. "A whole new ball game." Floodlight Theater, 1956. Frank Fontaine took his seat near the stage in the small auditorium of the Footlight Theater. He was here to see Sander Cohen's new cabaret production, Janus. Cohen promoted it as a tragic farce about identity. It was actually an oddball collaboration between Sander Cohen and the surgeon Steinman, but Fontaine's mind was elsewhere. He was remembering something Ryan had said. Even ideas can be contraband. Settling into the plush seat, Fontaine smiled to himself. Ironically, Ryan had sparked an idea about that little phrase. Spread the right subversive belief, it could turn this place on its head. Could dump Ryan at the bottom, lift Frank Fontaine up to the top. Feeling overfull from his dinner, a little drunk from the wine, Fontaine glanced over his shoulder at the audience crowding into the small theater. There was Steinman, the surgeon, overdressed in a tuxedo, playing author. There was Diane McClintock, standing at the head of the aisle. In the doorway, she wore a low-cut red beaded black frock, carried a matching beaded purse. She was frowning, looking at her diamond-encrusted watch, waiting for Ryan, no doubt. She was Ryan's fiancée as well as his receptionist. 2 seats were empty right next to Fontaine. This might be a great opportunity. He stood up and waved to Diane, though he scarcely knew the woman. He pointed to the 2 seats, smiling. She glanced through the door to the lobby, then nodded briskly, her lips pursed, and hurried down to him. "Mr. Fontaine." "Miss McClintock." He stepped aside so she could take a seat. "I've saved a spot for Andrew, too," he said. "Even if he shows up," Diane muttered, sitting down. "He's always so busy." He sat beside her. "I understand someone might be announcing a wedding soon." She snorted, then remembered herself. "Oh, yes. When he decides the time is right, we'll make the announcement." She opened her purse. "You wouldn't have a cigarette? Oh, bother, I seem to be out." Fontaine noticed that most of the purse was taken up by a book. "I do have a cigarette for you," he said, complete with Fontaine Futuristic's matchbook, very stylish. He held the case out. She took a cigarette, and he lit it for her. "You're a lifesaver." "Looks like you're carrying books around in that thing. Does it make a better weapon that way?" She blew smoke at the ceiling. "No need to be dismissive of a woman's desire to learn. I'm reading a Fitzgerald novel from the 20s, The Beautiful and the Damned." He thought, what could be more fitting? But winking at her, he said, One thing I'm not dismissive of is a woman's desires. She looked at him with narrowed eyes, as if thinking of bringing him up short. Then she gave way to a titter of laughter. Oh gosh, that kind of remark, a woman's desires, makes me feel like I was back working at the club where Andrea and I met. She glanced over her shoulder. You haven't seen him here, have you? Afraid not. Maybe he ought to let her know, obliquely, that he might be available to squire her if Ryan gave her the brush off. She could be useful. If he doesn't show up, I'll heroically offer you my arm, madam, and escort you from here, all the way to the moon and back. It's even farther to the moon than it used to be down here, she said, but she seemed pleased. Me, I kinda hope he doesn't show up. She glanced back at the door again, then stepped on her cigarette as the curtains parted. Show's startin', she sighed. It took him a moment to recognize Sander Cohen, as made up as he was, with another face entirely slung on the back of his head. Cohen was dressed in a skin-tight Lincoln green, and had an absurd mustache and a beard, and a feeble little bow and arrows slung over his shoulder. He pranced to mandolin music in front of a painted forest backdrop, and broke into song about he loved to be in the greenwood with my merry men, oh, my gay and merry men, my, oh, so happy men. And then came along that dreadful bitch known as Maid Marian, and oh, how paradise has fallen. His merry men, looking more like nearly naked Greek wrestlers, came dancing out of the wood, waving arrows and singing the chorus with him. Oh, Jesus wept, Fontaine thought. Then the King of England came along wearing lion-blazoned coat, a gold-painted crown, and a red beard that was coming loose from his chin. He brought Cohen to his castle and set him to be the new Sheriff of Nottingham. Robin Hood lost little time in assassinating the king, merrily stabbing him to the beat of the song, and then, switching the face on the back of his head around to the front, the mask resembled the king. He dragged the body off and took the king's place. The one-act musical mercifully ended to a smattering of applause, although Dr. Steinman stood up, clapped lustily, and shouted, "Bravo! Bravissimo!" Fontaine helped Diane into her wrap. Maybe he could get her to the bar. After a few drinks, she might remember her cigarette girl origins. But suddenly Ryan was coming down the aisle, shaking hands with people, nodding, waving to Diane. "Sorry I'm late, darling." So much for that, but the evening wasn't a bust. Despite having to watch Cohen flounce about, the play had given Fontaine an idea. On the way out of the theater, he paused to gaze at one of Ryan's earliest propaganda posters. "Rapture is the hope of the world," it declared, over a picture of Andrew Ryan holding the world on his shoulders. Andrew Ryan as Atlas. Looking to see that no one was watching, Frank Fontaine tore the poster down. Bill McDonough's flat, 1956. Sitting on a sofa near the big sea-view window, Bill McDonough wondered if keeping records of his thoughts and impressions of life in Rapture was really a good idea. He tried it for a while, but it didn't come naturally. Ryan was pushing for everyone to keep recordings of their problems, their plans, for some kind of planned historical retrospective. It was becoming something of a fad, but Bill was starting to wonder exactly how it might be used against a man. The tape recorder was sitting on the coffee table by a mug of greenish beer. Neither seemed appealing. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 7. Elaine would be home from Arcadia with a little one soon enough. If he was going to do this, he'd better get to it. He reached for the tape recorder, but somehow his hand found its way to the mug of beer instead. He sighed, put the beer down, pressed the record button on the device, and began. "Rapture's changing, but Ryan can see the wolves in the woods. This Fontaine fella, he's a crook and a proper tea leaf. But he's got the atom, and that makes him the governor. He's sinking the profits back into bigger and better plasmids and building them Fontaine's poorhouses, or like Fontaine recruiting centers. Before we know it, bloke's gonna have an army of splicers, and we're gonna have ourselves a whole heap of miseries." He switched off the tape recorder. There was a lot more on his mind, but he was reluctant to make doubts about Rapture a matter of record. The phone on the coffee table rang. He answered the phone. "Right, Bill here." "McDonough, it's Sullivan. We've had another 3 killings in the upper atrium, and the council is calling an emergency meeting. Council conference room, 1956. Andrew Ryan wasn't sure he wanted this special meeting of the Rapture Council, but he was reassured to see Bill McDonough and Sullivan come in. He still felt he could trust those two. Only 6 people had shown up this time. They were gathered around the oval conference table in the ornate gold-trimmed little room near the top of the highest air scraper in Rapture. Anna, Bill, Sullivan, Anton Kincaid, Ryan, and Rizzo. Ryan missed the presence of the late Reuben Greavy, and he could have done without Anna Culpepper, who liked to put her oar in without having anything useful to say. He should never have allowed her on the council. Ryan toyed with an untasted cup of coffee, freeing his age. His role as Rapture's guide and mentor is becoming a weight. He could almost feel it pinching his back, making his bones creak. Some of the council were making it worse, always prodding at him with their feeble little ideas. Meanwhile, Rapture's problems have become Andrew Ryan's: crime, subversives, foolish use of plasmids, constant maintenance problems. Those required real vision to overcome. He was seeing that more and more clearly. A man needed a willingness to institute big solutions to big problems. "We're so close to the surface here," Anna said, sitting down with a cup of tea. "Makes me think it wouldn't be so bad to have a few excursions to the surface world, just close by on a boat, I mean." She looked up at the glass ceiling, just a yard or two under the surface of the ocean. Moonlight penetrated the waves, came glimmering down to color the room's electric illumination with a blue-white paleness, making Anna, gazing upward, look as if she'd put a white face on. That made Ryan think about Senator Cohen. He was glad Cohen hadn't come. The performer was getting over more socially peculiar. He'd sent a jet postal note, begging off with some enigmatic excuse about being caught up in the hunt for art, which must be captivated, bound to the stage in preparation for the Titanomacy. Titanomacy, whatever was he talking about? Ryan glanced up as a shadow passed over them. The silhouette of a large, sleek shark swam overhead, circling the lighted room in curiosity. "In time," Ryan said. "We may have an excursion, Anna. All in good time." Anna sighed and gave him a pitying look he'd found so infuriating lately. "Dare I point out it has been 10 years since Hiroshima. There have been no further uses of atomic weapons. The war, it appears, is a cold one. That's what our radio tells us." Rizzo sniffed disapprovingly at her skepticism. "Riskies have been stockpiling A-bombs just same as the US of A, Miss Culpepper. Why, it's a tinderbox out there. The commies are taking over China. The Soviets have got their agents every goddamn place. Only a matter of time before the atomic war comes." "Exactly," Ryan said. "Good old Rizzo, a sensible man. And that aside, we have to remain as hidden away here as we can. We don't want anybody taking notice of anything out here. The lighthouse is risky enough if it weren't for the air draw." Ryan changed the subject. "Let's get to it. We have to decide on a policy about all this violence." "It's simple, boss," Sullivan said, leaning his elbows on the table, a pinched look on his face. "We gotta ban plasmids. I know how you feel about banning products, but we got no choice. You're talking about atomic power? I'm not sure these plasmids are any safer than that stuff." Sullivan's words were slurring ever so slightly. He'd been drinking before the meeting. Ryan reached for patience. "Chief, I know it was hard for you to lose Harker that way, but the market has a life of its own. We can't choke that life off with bans or even..." He had difficulty actually saying the word. "Regulations. The solution is simple. Ryan Enterprises is now in the plasmid business. A better product will draw people in, and they'll buy one that doesn't affect their minds." We glanced at Bill, thinking he'd looked weary and troubled. "What do you think, Bill?" "You're seriously going into plasmids, Gov?" Bill asked, seeming genuinely surprised. "It'll take more time to develop a plasmid that doesn't have side effects. Meanwhile..." "Bill, it's either we go into them or ban them. And how did that prohibition work?" "But they're so addictive." "So is alcohol." Bill shook his head. "Of what happened to Mr. Gravy. If you'd seen it. Yes. Reuben Gravy's death was a painful subject for Ryan. That was a great loss to me. He was an artist, an entrepreneur, a scientist, a true Renaissance man. A great loss. I feel responsible. I should have sent security along with him, but he would insist on going wherever he liked in Rapture. I was the one with him, Bill said, looking very unhappy. If anyone's responsible... The only one responsible, growled Sullivan, is that telekinetic bitch that killed him. But Mr. Ryan, if you want to continue allowing plasmid sales and get Ryan Industries into it, he shook his head, wincing at the thought, then it's gotta be regulated. We'll consider restricting some plasmids, Ryan said, though he had no intention of really restricting any plasmids. This is a rough transitional period, to be expected, part of the tumult of the market. Do we even know for sure which plasmids are out there? Kincaid asked. Sullivan shrugged. Not for sure. I've got a partial list. He searched his pockets, looking for it. Got it here somewhere. Some are kind of black market. Some Fontaine sells in shops. He's selling Eve right next to it. Damn floors are littered with syringes. Here it is. He unfolded a wrinkled piece of paper. Sullivan cleared his throat, squinted at the paper, and read out, Electrobolt fires bolts of electricity, can stun a man or kill him. Incinerate started with plasmid you could use for cooking, but it's now sort of like a flamethrower. It comes out of your hand. I have seen teleport, not sure how we can control that one. That's a big Murray, Christ. How do you jail someone who can teleport? Telekinesis, that's what killed Mr. Greavy. You all seen that. There's Winter Blast, sends out a current of super cold air, freezes your enemy solid, and there's that spider thing they go up on the walls with. Lots of those creeps around. Creeps, Anna said, absently glancing at the transparent ceiling. They do creep, don't they? Good one, Chief. He looked at her in puzzlement. He hadn't been joking. What about this teleport? Bill asked. What do we do about that bloody Houdini splicers? It can't be legal. Ryan nodded. He didn't trust it either. It weakened security. It might enable people to leave Rapture. He had security cameras and turrets set up in the only egresses to Rapture, stop anyone unauthorized from leaving. He was in the process of installing more security bots. Some plasmids could make a joke of all those wonderfully engineered devices. We'll see what we can do to suppress that one. Kincaid tried to straighten his tie, only to make it more crooked. I don't understand the physics of these plasmids. Where are these new atom cells drawing all their energy from? If the splicer shoots out flame, does it come from his intestinal methane? Where does he get the raw material? Does he lose a pound afterward? Bill looked at him. You're the buffin. No theories then? Kincaid shrugged. I can only speculate. All this extra energy is being drawn from the splicer's environment in some way. The air around us is charged, after all. That could account for the electrobolt. The mutagenic cells, once resigned by Adam, can have a sort of secondary mitochondria that might provide specialized energy emissions. We don't know what most of our genes do. Some might be designed for these powers, which might even account for tales of supernatural beings, genies and magicians and the like. But those mutations didn't work out, you see. Perhaps because they tend to be burdened by negative side effects, like psychosis, facial excretions, and so on. Bit of a dodgy omen, that in it, Kincaid, Bill pointed out. If these mutations exist in the past, they didn't make it. Didn't work out then. Might not work out for Rapture then. Something in that, Kincaid allowed, nodding slightly. But Mr. Ryan's right. If it's possible to create plasmids, then it should be possible to perfect them. We can work out the bad parts. Just imagine having rational control of telekinesis, or the ability to climb walls like a fly, to hurl electricity, to become superhuman. It's wonderful in its own way. Maybe people could just learn to use Adam without overindulging, Anna suggested. An education program. Finally, Ryan thought, Anna had something useful. Not a bad idea. We'll look into that. The side effects of plasmids, Sullivan pointed out, are the only thing keeping more people from buying Adam. You fix the side effects, we'll have superpower people everywhere. We'll all have to do it just to keep some kind of balance of power. I don't want to cough fire every time I belch. Bill nodded eagerly. Chief Sullivan's in the right of it. Side effects or not. Plasmids are just too dangerous. Rapture is mostly a metal, but it's complex. And it makes it vulnerable, fragile in some places. Daft bastards run around shooting fire, blasting lightning about. They could bring down the whole bloody house of cards. Ryan made a dismissive gesture. We'll get the splicers under control. Meanwhile, he added musingly, this is all part of our evolution, just growing pains. He considered explaining fully, but they wouldn't understand if he told them what he really thought. Greavy had understood, though. He understood the winnowing. The subtraction of weak links from the great chain. What they were going through in Rapture was now the heat of a welding torch, both destructive and constructive. But as it isn't just the superpowered sons of bitches, Sullivan growled, grumbling the list of plasmids in his shaky hands as the leadheads rampaging around the city, shooting guns at random. Faster reflexes from all that atom. They've had to kill 4 in the last 2 days. Sad thing is, they all had kids, transferred to that new orphanages of Fontaine's. Fontaine, Bill said, looking at Ryan significantly. Got a finger in every bloody thing. Every kind of smuggling. He's not just bringing in that cheap hooch and Bibles anymore, Governor. Ryan grunted. How's the evidence looking on Fontaine's smugglers? Sullivan sat up straighter, suddenly energized. I've got enough to raid him, Mr. Ryan. Then we'll have proof. I've got a witness to the smuggling ring up in detention, under protection. Then put it together, Ryan said. We'll raid his operation and see what we get. Kincaid shook his head. All that charity stuff he's been behind. You've got to wonder what he's up to. He's up to undermining me, Ryan said bitterly. Charity is a form of socialism. It's too much like that Lamb woman. If they're not working together, then they will be in time. Like Lenin recruiting Stalin. Stopping Fontaine stops this propaganda tool he calls charity. What about this plasmids business? Rizzo asked. We don't want to ban them or regulate them, so how do we control them? Now that's a good question, mate, Bill said. I'm about to announce a new Ryan Enterprises product line, Ryan said, smiling in a way he hoped was reassuring. A new line of weapons, chemical throwers, flamethrowers, grenade launchers, better machine guns. We can use weapons innovation to counterbalance the splicers until we get Adam perfected. Bill shook his head skeptically but said nothing. There's something else, Sullivan said, frowning. I've got a source in Fontaine Futuristics. Tells me about some kind of what they call a pheromone experimentation, something like that. That can be used to get a handle on those splicers. He means pheromone, I suspect, Kincaid said, smirking. Maybe that was it, Sullivan said, unruffled. Something about Souchon using what those things, to control the splicers, without the splicers even knowing it. Maybe spraying the chemical that makes them all show up in one place so they cause problems for, well, anybody you wanted to cause problems for, I guess. Ryan scowled. Control the splicers with pheromones? He was intrigued, but it was troubling too, because Souchon worked for Fontaine. Meaning that Fontaine would, in turn, eventually control at least some of the splicers. And it was becoming clear, Fontaine was a predator. If you allowed him to grab that kind of power, he would use it to take a Rapture over. Probably he'd do it behind a smokescreen. As Bill had warned, Fontaine could even partner up with Lamb's followers, now that they were at loose ends. It could mean the destruction of Rapture. Fort Frolic, Fleet Hall, backstage, 1956. Can anyone ever make you feel like Sander Cohen can? Rapture's most beloved musical artist returns with Why Even Ask, his greatest album yet, songs of love, songs of joy, songs of passion. Buy Why Even Ask, and invite Sander Cohen into your home today. Hurrying through the empty backstage area, Martin Finnegan chuckled to himself hearing the public service announcement playing from Cohen's dressing room. Cohen was listening to the PA announcement over and over again. Can anyone ever make you feel like Sander Cohen can? Rapture's most beloved musical artist returns. Martin went down the wood-walled corridor, found Senator Cohen seated pensively in front of his gold-framed oval dressing room mirror, putting on another layer of makeup with one hand. With the other, he was shaping the needle-like points of his hooked mustache. Cohen wore a purple and blue silk smoking jacket, silk slippers, and blue silk pajamas. He looked at Martin in the mirror. "I'm running short of makeup, you know," Cohen said. He picked up the stub of an eyebrow pencil and began to darken his eyebrows. "I've asked Andrew for more, but he talks tiresomely of import priorities, the importance of creating our own goods. Does he really expect me to make my own eyebrow pencil? My, you look virile today, Martin." All said while outlining his eyebrow, looking at Martin in the mirror. That face became ever more lurid each time Martin saw it, even more like a mad, mustachioed mime. "And invite Senator Cohen into your home today." The recording ended, and Cohen restarted it. "Can anyone ever make you feel?" "What do you think of that announcement?" Cohen asked, starting in the other eyebrow, watching him closely on the mirror. "It's going out tonight on the public address. Trying to push my new record. It seems a bit bland to me, lacking in verve. Doesn't have that libidinous fervor that I so delight in." Martin sat in a wooden chair behind Cohen, wishing he'd stopped playing the announcement. "I think it's good for regular folks to hear," Martin said. "Kind of family-friendly, like. That's good, you need that. Oh God, I hope it doesn't mean they'll bring their children to my shows. I can't imagine how I was able to bear being one. Fortunately, it didn't last long." Martin shifted in the uncomfortable chair, making it squeak. "Speaking of how Senator Cohen can make me feel, the note you sent me mentioned trying something new?" Cohen tilted, hand fluttered over his mouth. "Well..." He winked and opened the dressing table drawer and drew out 2 bottles, setting them down on the dressing table, one after the other. They were squat bottles filled with red fluid. Martin knew full well what they were. Cohen opened the lower drawer, took out a flat black box and opened it. In velvet-lined compartments were 2 syringes filled with glowing fluid. Eve, for activating the plasmids. Staring at the bottles, Martin's mouth went dry. He and Cohen had taken cocaine together before, cut with a lot of booze. For this, he had seen splicers. Some of them seemed fairly together. Others, though, they were like nitroglycerin, always ready to explode. Then there was the disfigurement. Those who seemed used a great deal of Adam ended up looking like they had a skin disease. The loony expressions glued on their faces made it all worse. On the other hand, look at that blue glow in the bottles. The implied power in it. "Well, shall we indulge?" Cohen asked, his mouth screwed into a cone and twisting comically to one side. "What the hell?" Martin heard himself say. He knew he'd try it sooner or later. He'd tried everything sooner or later. As Cohen prepared the syringes, Martin found he regretted that his first experience with Adam was going to be with Senator Cohen. The artiste always took everything to crazy extremes. After that last little drunken trip into Arcadia, dancing naked with the Centurions, forcing a teenage boy to have sex with an octopus, they were all lucky not to be in Rapture detention cells. They'd gotten out one step ahead of the constables that time. But Martin did want to be a stage performer. So far, the only performance he'd done in Rapture had been at Cohen's tableaus, where Martin and Hector Rodriguez and Silas Cobb and a couple others dressed in scanty costumes and posed heroically under the artiste's direction for a very small audience. Many in the audience had been touching themselves obscenely. What was it Hector had said later that night? It could well be that all art is just a grift, after all. "Now let us partake," said Cohen. "This bottle contains Sport Boost and Winter Blast, a splicer cocktail. That's yours. Mine is something very, very hard to get. Teleport. Next I want to try those spider splicings. Well, what are you waiting for? Bottoms up, so to speak." Martin took a deep drink from the plasmid's bottle. The thick fluid was surprisingly bland, though there was a chemical aftertaste, a bit of saltiness, perhaps a suggestion of the taste of blood, and then a terrifying rigidity struck him. It was as if someone was running an electric current through his muscles, a charge generated from within his brain, cracking out through his nervous system. It was making him go rigid. His arching back was threatening to snap his spine. And then he fell to the floor, shaking with spasms, fighting for breath. Waves of dark, hissing energy unfolded in him. He felt high, but he was also terrified. He was distantly aware that Cohen was dragging down his pants. Presto plungio, Cohen whooped, and then came this piercing pain of a needle jabbing into Martin's gluteus maximus. White fire exploded behind Martin's eyes. And it was all he could see for a moment, like gazing into the heart of a welding arc. Unfamiliar tastes, like random chemicals, passed in waves through his mouth. He heard his pulse hammering in his ears. Then a wave of relief came, a ripple of release as the rigidity washed away in a rolling tide of living coolness. After a few moments he was able to move again, and struggled to his knees. Now, Cohen said, laying an empty syringe on the makeup dresser, I'm going to drink mine. Here's the syringe for me. You do me. I mean the syringe. And don't try to use your powers yet. You might turn me into a block of ice. They repeated the process for Cohen, Martin injecting him in the rump, going about it mechanically even as he struggled for some kind of inner equilibrium. He didn't quite feel real, somehow. Martin set the empty syringe aside and sat gingerly on the chair as the artiste flopped about like a fish on the floor, the Eve merging with the atom, showing in alternating blue-red energies in Cohen's body. Suddenly, Cohen went limp, sighing, and he sat up, chortled gleefully, and vanished. There was an ambient sucking sound as a thump of air rushed to fill the sparkling vacuum where he had been. Sander? Martin's tongue felt thick. It was hard to talk. His head pounded like a parade drum, thumped by a cocaine fiend, but he felt good, profanely good. A sucking and sizzling, a cone-shaped sparkling, and there he was, materializing at the door to the corridor. Ah, look, I did it, Martin. I teleported. It seemed to Martin that Cohen's face was rippling from within itself, bumps rising and falling on it as if little pistons were pumping randomly under his facial skin. Martin laughed. It didn't matter really what was happening to Sander Cohen. Nothing mattered. The energy roared like a tornado in the room. The sinews of visible electric power stretched and snapped in the very air. He looked around, expecting to see these powerful forces throwing the furnishings about, whipping things through the air, but nothing was affected. He was seeing these energies in his mind. Come, follow me. I have a special delight for us in the rehearsal room. Cohen crowed, whirling about, dancing through the door. Come and see my guests. Yes? What sort, Sander? I'm not sure I can deal with guests. I feel strange. But you must, Cohen insisted gleefully. This is a test. I test all my disciples. Some shine like galaxies. Some burn like a moth at the flame. Just remember, the artist swims in a lake of pain. Perhaps he evolves into something magnificent. Perhaps he drowns. Will you drown, or will you come along? Sander Cohen went out the door, and Martin was somehow swept along behind him, carried by some powerful inner current. He was unable to walk slowly, unable to think slowly. He was a living dynamo of energy. No wonder people get addicted to this. That thought came, and he pushed it rudely aside. No raining on the parade. And the parade drum thumped frantically, pacing him down the hall to the rehearsal room at the rear of the backstage area. Cohen had already teleported ahead. Martin felt like he was water skiing, pulled along in a bracing cold medium by a powerful engine. He burst through the door into the rehearsal room and found Sander Cohen stalking back and forth in front of 3 people, their arms spread in restraints. They were bound to 3 interlinked metal frames bolted to the small rehearsal stage. It was all seen through a glass darkly. For Martin, a filter like mental sunglasses that made some bits shine out and muted others. It seemed unreal, almost two-dimensional. like it was all happening to someone else, like a movie. "Please," said a busty, frowsy woman with flapper-style brown hair. She was pinioned on the left side of the practice stage. "Let me go." Her eyes kept fluttering, perhaps because one of them was losing its false eyelashes. She wore a ripped black shift and one red pump, the other foot bare. In the center framework, a middle-aged man with a tonsure of white hair shook in his bonds in rage and fear. His suit was torn and bloody. His nose was swelling and leaking blood, his left eye swollen shut. Cohen's third guest was a young man in a t-shirt with tousled blonde hair and a little red blonde beard that, along with his green trousers, made Martin think of Robin Hood. He looked like he was drugged or drunk. He just sort of hung there in his restraints, murmuring inaudibly, eyes slitted, lifting his head now and then. "We shall call these three Wilkin, Blinken, and Nod," declared Cohen, parading around them, clapping his hands. I was right. It's a movie, Martin thought. It's not real, none of it. He was in the audience, and in the movie at the same time. It felt good to watch it and be the hero of it. "Please, Mr. Cohen," the women wailed. "I wasn't holding out on the tips. The other girls all keep the same amount." "The constables Hector and Candavish caught these three for me, Martin," Cohen said, taking a cigarette lighter in a silver cigarette case from his pocket of his smoking jacket. He tapped a button in the case so that the cigarette popped out of a little hole. He lifted up to the lighter, puffed it, and blew smoke into Blinken's face. "Candavish," Blinken snarled. "That crook. Supposed to be the law. You bought him off." "And isn't that always the case with the best policemen?" Cohen said, putting the cigarette case away. "That Sullivan is such a square. Won't take a bribe. But Candavish likes my little gifts, doesn't he, Blinken?" "That's not my goddamn name," the older man shouted. His remaining eye blinked furiously as he struggled with the tight leather restraints around his wrists and ankles. He went angrily on. "You know damn well who I am. I worked for you a good 6 years, Cohen. I did a hell of a job in that crappy little casino of yours." "Oh, but you are skimming the winnings, old Blinken," Cohen said, his voice oily. He toyed with the cigarette lighter. Ask anybody in Fort Frolic. I was completely on the level," Blinken snarled. "I was totally." He interrupted himself with a long, pealing scream as Senator Cohen put his cigarette out in Blinken's remaining eye. Cohen made a face at the man shrieking, and then came that sucking sound, the thump, the sparkling, and Cohen had vanished, only to reappear close beside Nod. Cohen reached out and stroked the young man's blonde hair. "The problem is an artistic one, a compositional question," Cohen said, raising his voice to be heard over Blinken's cries. "Shut that one up for now, will you?" "Sure." Martin was glad to do it. Blinken's screams were distracting him from the movie. He strode over to him, took him by the throat, but instead of squeezing, something else came from his fingers, not quite intentionally. Ice. It spread out from his fingers onto the man's neck, his head, and clicking up over his chin. It covered his face like a helmet. In another second it had coated his shoulders, his torso. The man was caught in a carapace of ice. "Stop!" Cohen barked. Martin stepped back, unsure of what was to happen at first, then realized he'd used the plasmid. The power the specialized atom had been given had sent a current of entropy from his fingers, slowing molecules, drawing water vapor from the air, coating Blinken in ice. "If I hadn't stopped you," Cohen said, playing with the lighter, flicking it on and off, "you'd have frozen him right through in another second. This way he's in a pretty cocoon of ice, for now." It was true. Blinken was wriggling in the sarcophagus of ice. A little melted water, mixed with bloody foam, sipped about his face. His cries were muffled. One wild eye was bleeding, the other rolling under its blackened, swollen lid. Martin marveled that he felt so little. He was so distant from what was happening and this close in front of him. But the rolling hotness, the transporting sweetness of the plasmid high was still upon him, dominating him, and nothing else was truly real. "Please, mister, don't do that," the women shrieked. "No, no!" Martin turned to see Cohen flicking the lighter under her ragged clothing, her hair setting Winkin on fire. We're almost ready, Martin, Cohen crowed as she writhed, shrieking in growing plume of flame. You must capture her in ice so when she's in just the right posture for composition, we're making a glorious tableau, a lovely trebuchet of tragedy. The Human Condition, I shall entitle it. 3 souls revealed. If only Steinman could see his glorious transfiguration. Martin could barely hear him over the women shrieking. Most of her hair was gone now. What was this movie he was in again? What was the title? Martin couldn't remember. There, Cohen shouted, leaping with excitement, as she arches her back and howls and spreads her fingers. Now, freeze her! Just point at her and freeze her right there. Martin stretched out his arm and willed the plasma to emanate from his fingers. He felt the chill out of it passing through him, saw ice crystals shimmering in the air in front of his hand. Suddenly, the fire around the dying woman was snuffed out. She was instantly frozen solid. Her eyeless sockets, the flame had melted her eyes, filling with pockets of crushed ice, her mouth agape around a chunk of ice, her singed away hair replaced by icicles. Martin felt a wave of nausea pass through him. He was starting to see that this was real. These people were real. Cohen vanished, teleporting, then reappearing near Blingen, who was just starting to crack out of his ice cocoon. As soon as he breaks out, when he opens his mouth to shout at us, freeze him, Cohen ordered. Freeze him solid. At least that would end the man's terror, Martin thought, the thought making him feel sick in itself. This is real. He emanated the entropic power of Winter's blast, and the plasmid quickly froze the man through and through, and Martin shuddered as if he was frozen himself. Ah! Cohen cackled just before he vanished, reappearing close to the growing young man, hanging slack in his bonds. Only one panel of the trebuchet remains. Come and play with Nod, Martin. Martin found he was drawn to Nod. Holding his hands went easily to him. He was a very pretty young man after all. Cohen took out an elegant little straight razor. Medical Pavilion, Aesthetic Ideals Surgery, 1956. J.S. Steinman was bemused and distracted, admiring the eyeless, lump face he had so deftly removed from the woman's skull, holding it up to the sea light from the windows so that he could see the deep blue of the North Atlantic through her empty eye sockets. Steinman thought, after deity, your light is entering my eyes. And then the visitor buzzer raised intrusively at him. Damn them, why won't they leave genius to be genius? Steinman muttered, hanging the detached face, complete with her nose and eyebrows, over the lamp beside the operating table. The electric yellow lamplight came prettily through the sockets, but the blood emitted an awful stench in contact with the hot lamp. The buzzer buzzed again. Wait here, my dear, he sighed to the faceless woman lying on the operating table. Of course, speaking to her was pure whimsy. She couldn't hear him. She was dead. She'd been a rogue splicer he had bought from a constable, who shot her in the head when she tried to decapitate someone with a fish knife. The bullet had left her alive anyway. She'd lived until a few minutes ago, but paralyzed. So Steinman hadn't needed anesthetic or restraints to keep her quiet during the carving. He left the operating theater, climbed the stairs, and went through the operating suite's door, locking it behind him, absently toying with a scalpel. He crossed the small lobby and opened the outer door. Steinman realized he should have cleaned up a bit before answering the door. Frank Fontaine and his bodyguards were standing outside the medical pavilion, staring aghast at his blood-spattered surgical coat and the bloody scalpel in his hand. The booster plasmid he'd been using was starting to make him a bit abrupt, careless perhaps. He had gone 3 nights without sleep. We didn't realize you were, busy, Doctor, Fontaine said, rolling his eyes at his bodyguards, a thuggish sort in a tatty suit and a grubby long-haired man who looked like a dirty Jesus. Steinman shrugged. Just some anatomical investigation. Work on cadavers, a trifle messy. Do you wish to schedule some? What I wish to do, Fontaine interrupted sharply, is to come in and talk in private. Steinman gestured with the scalpel. His movement was preternaturally brisk, so that the scalpel made a whipping sound as it cut through the air. The bodyguards reached for their guns. "Take it easy," Fontaine told him, raising a calm hand. "Wait out here." He stepped into Steinman's lobby and closed the door behind him, but Steinman noticed that Fontaine had left his hand inside the flap of his coat. "No need for reaching for that gun," Steinman sniffled. "I'm not some lunatic. You just caught me at a bad time." "And maybe you could put away the scalpel." "Oh, yes." He stuck it in his jacket pocket so it stuck up like a comb. "What can I do for you?" Fontaine ran a hand over his bald head. "I'm looking to need some work done. Some on me and some on... There's a guy who works for me. Kind of looks like me. I want you to make him look a lot like me." Probably," Steinman said, cleaning the blood from under his fingernails. "I should have seen him to be sure, but you have a distinct face, and that helps. That chin, yes, if you want, I might be able to do a face transplant. Yours on his on yours. Has never been successfully done, but I've always wanted to try it." "Yeah, well, not a chance. No, just a little painless surgery so I look different. So he looks like I do now. I want nobody to know about it but you and me. Now, I mean nobody. Not Ryan's people, not Lamb's people, not even my people." "Lamb? Haven't you heard? She got some kind of uprising cooking in Persephone. I don't trust her. I don't want her knowing any of my business." "Mum's the word. So you can make me look different, in pretty shorter and order. Painless, not a freak like some you've been turning out. A good face, a face people trust. Should be possible," Steinman allowed. "It'll cost you. I need a free supply of plasmids and plenty of cash." "You'll get it, but the plasmids came after the operations. I don't want you cracking up a rogue when you're working on me. You already look like you could use some sleep." Steinman waved airily. "I work long hours perfecting both my skills and my art." "Okay, fine. I'll get you a nice deposit so you're all ready to do this at a moment's notice. It'll be soon. Remember, not a word to anyone, not even to Cohen. He's too close to Ryan." "Oh, I see. Fear not. I would not have mentioned it anyway. I am ever discreet. It's part of my professional code." "Better be, or you'll be finding yourself going headfirst out an airlock without a diving suit." Now, there is the real Frank Fontaine, Steinman thought. That icy voice, the even colder eyes, his true colors. Steinman winked conspiratorially. Fontaine just looked back at him, then went out the door. Chapter 14. Fighting McDonough's Bar, 1956. Chief Sullivan, Pat Cavendish, and Karlowski were waiting for Bill in Fighting McDonough's Bar. Sullivan was wearing a trench coat. Cavendish in his usual rolled-up shirt sleeves and slacks, no matter the temperature. Karlowski in a brown leather jacket that might have come from the Soviet Air Force. Bill carried a Tommy gun Sullivan had issued him the night before, but he wished he didn't have to carry it. He'd gone on bombing missions, but he'd never dropped the bombs himself. Still, it was beginning to look as if guns were going to be much as a part of life in Rapture as jet polsto and the bathyspheres. It was early morning and the bar was closed. The wooden planks of the floor creaked under his tread as he came up to the group of armed men waiting near the window. Those planks always reminded Bill reassuringly of the old pubs back at home. A killer whale, as big as a Cadillac, cruised by the window, slick black and white, in no hurry, a large eye rolling to peer curiously at them. "Hey, ready down there?" Bill asked. He was wearing a deputy's constable badge. He was even more uncomfortable with that than the gun. Elaine had been right weepy when she'd heard he'd been deputized. It was only temporary till they had recruited more constables. Quite a number of them had been killed by splicers. It was risky, and it meant he was subject to the orders of Pat Cavendish and the new head constable, the right bastard if I'd ever seen one. Sullivan nodded. They should be right outside the door of the wharf, keeping their goddamn mouths shut, I hope. Where's this hideout at? Bill asked. Window says it's in cavern under the fisheries. We think they bring stuff into Rapture with a sub, and they take it to an unregistered bathysphere through a tunnel in their hideout. Right now the sub's accessible to us in Bay 2. Word is they haven't moved the contraband out the sub to the cave yet. We're going to be able to find the contraband in the sub? Kandavish asked. Probably hidden good. Sullivan scratched his undershaven chin. We worked out that the stuff's probably being smuggled in one of the fuel tanks. They're refueling their fuel way more often than they need to, meaning they aren't carrying as much fuel as they should. Something's taking up that fuel space. A voice was crackling from Sullivan's handheld radio. Ready to go, Chief. Okay, Grogan, we're coming down, Sullivan said, speaking to the radio. As soon as we're there, we hit him. He stuck the radio in a coat pocket, hefted his shotgun, and said, Let's go. Sullivan led the way, and they followed him down a series of stairs, through hatches and doors, past wharfs, and into a passage that led to the sub-bay. 6 constables, heavily armed, were waiting at the rusting door in the sub-bay. Sullivan trotted toward them, signaling go ahead with his gun hand. Constable Grogan raised a pistol in acknowledgement. He was a stocky, freckle-faced man with sandy hair and a bushy, rust-colored mustache. A badge glinted in the lapel of his suit. He threw the latch, opened the middle door with a shove of his shoulder, and he and the others rushed in. Sullivan, Kandavish, Karlowski, and Bill were close on their heels. Kandavish was grinning like a wolf, Karlowski smiling grimly, pistol in hand. Sullivan, pale and grave, Bill started to move past Kandavish. Hang back, McDonough, Kandavish said. Leave this to the real officers. We'll call you from the front line if we need to. Bill had a mind to hand Kandavish's badge and tell him where to shove it, but he silently dropped back to the rear. He wasn't eager to pull the trigger on anyone. They ran across a bank of carved-out rock into a great echoing metal room with its own ocean water lake. The room smelled of diesel and ocean brine. A converted 3-inch or 12-foot Ballo-class submarine without deck guns rocked in a flat calm. Lit by electric lights on steel rafters, the hangar-like room was just big enough to contain the submarine, and enough water for it to submerge in. To the left, through the translucent water, Bill saw underwater steel doors that led into the airlock in the open sea. Promptly, there was another, smaller side channel along the way for the bathysphere to take the smuggler's hideout. A big yellow fishing net was folded up on the afterdeck of the floating submarine. A pontoon gangway ran from the stony verge just inside the door out to the rust-streaked vessel. On the side of the conning tower was a stenciled Rapture 5. The constables were already running along the gangway. Bill was at the rear, looking nervously around. There was no sign of life, not much noise, maybe a slight purr of idling motor from the sub. Then Bill caught a flicker of movement up in the rafters, beyond the glare of the lights. He leaned back, craning his head to look, shading his eyes with a hand. He just made out the face up there, someone on the catwalk near the ceiling. Bill had seen the man with Fontaine before. Reggie, his name was, and he seemed to be speaking into a handheld radio. Sullivan, Kandavish, wait! Bill shouted, stopping on the gangway. There's something wrong. Someone's up there. Sullivan hesitated just before the sub, looking around as he suspected something himself. Kandavish and Karlowski stopped to look back at him in puzzlement. Grogan was already in the submarine's top deck with 2 other men. Others were scrambling into the metal grating, rushing toward the hatch. Get that hatch open, Grogan yelled. And the rafters up there, Sullivan, Bill shouted, but there was a groaning, a churning at the submarine's aft. Vapor bubbled up, reeking of diesel. The water moiled and seethed. The submarine began to descend. It eased forward as it sank, heading toward the underwater doors opening in the submerged wall. The unattached gangway rocked in the waves of the submarine's descent. Water surged up over the vessel's bow, rushing over the shouting men on the deck. The submarine picked up speed, suddenly spurting forward and down. The conning tower dipped under the surface. The men on the deck were swept into the water, then sucked downward in the vessel's wake. Their screams quickly drowned out. The submarine angled sharply down, completely submerged now, sailing swiftly through the open steel doors into the shadowy undersea tunnel. Several men struggled in the sub's wake, deep underwater. Silhouettes were seen dimly in the water. They were like children's toys going down a drain, drawn by the suction of the closing doors. Bill squinted up at the ceiling again, raising his Tommy gun for a shot at Reggie, but he was gone. They fished the survivors from the water. Grogan hadn't made it. He had drowned in that tunnel somewhere. Standing together in the stone verge just inside the door to the now strangely empty room, the sodden Sullivan, Bill, Karlowski, and Candavish stared at the water, now calm. The gangway rocked gently on its pontoons. They had her ready to go, Bill observed. Just throw a switch and she's off. The bastards went out of their way to take that bloody sub down fast. They wanted to drown as many of us as they could. We're lucky more didn't go down with it, Sullivan said. God damn it, Grogan was a good man. I reckon I saw Fontaine's man Reggie up in the rafters, Bill said. Didn't have a chance to tell you it was him. Whoever it was, they were using a radio. Sullivan looked up. Yeah, giving the signal to submerge. That's what I figure. They're waiting for us. Hard to keep this right a secret. Hard to keep anything a secret long in Rapture, Chief. We're too crowded and becoming too bloody incestuous. Of course, you know what the bastards will say, Sullivan growled. Fontaine will say the sub was about to depart to do a job, and we just picked a bad time to go aboard. They'll claim they had no idea who we were. But there's one thing. I still got a witness. Herv Mandula. He can point us to more evidence. Bill nodded. He looked toward the closed, submerged steel doors and wondered where Grogan's body was floating now. Andrew Ryan's office, 1956. Andrew? Annoyed, Ryan looked up from his paperwork to see Diane in the doorway of his office. She had a "you'll never guess what" expression on her face. Well? Frank Fontaine is here to see you. Ryan sat back in his chair. He picked up a pencil and flipped through his fingers thoughtfully. Is he now? He has no appointment. Should I tell him to go away? No. Is Karlowski out there? He's the one who stopped Fontaine coming in. They're kind of having a big boy pissing contest of some kind. I mean, Karlowski and that man Reggie. He's here with Fontaine. Tell Karlowski to come in, and then bring Fontaine and his man in. This is overdue. It may prove interesting. Very well. Can I? No. You'll wait outside. She pointed, but went out to the entry room. Ryan wished he hadn't given Elaine the day off. He was seriously tired of Diane's airs, her possessiveness. He felt less and less like spending time with Diane. He needed one of his little intervals with Jasmine Jolene. A womanly woman, that Jasmine. A childbearer with beauty and talent. Karlowski came in, taking a pistol from a shoulder holster. He held it down by his side and stood to Ryan's left, watching the door as Reggie came in. Reggie didn't show a gun, but Ryan knew he had one. Reggie glanced at Karlowski. Tell him to put that heat away, Mr. Ryan. Ryan shrugged. Holster the gun, if you please. Karlowski glared at Reggie before he holstered the pistol. Reggie looked like that wasn't going to be good enough, but Frank Fontaine himself walked in then. Long overcoat, unbuttoned, hands in his pant pockets. He looked like a guy out for a walk on Broadway. His three-piece light blue suit was exquisitely tailored and pressed. Immaculate spats adorned his shoes, and a watch fob gleamed on his vest. Fontaine looked relaxed, pleased with himself. The arrogant rascal, Ryan thought, almost admiringly. Normally, Ryan said, I require an appointment, but I've been wanting to talk with you in person. We lost a good man trying to inspect your sub. Fontaine grinned. If you wanted to inspect the subs, Mr. Ryan, well, you should have made an appointment. Fontaine spread his hands in mock regret. If you don't tell us in advance, you might end up with your constables floating about face down again. Ryan leaned forward, letting anger show on his face. You knew damn well we were coming. You did another inspection the very next day, and the one after that. You found nothing. I'm not smuggling anything, Ryan. That's why I came here, to set the record straight. I don't expect you to admit it, Fontaine. I understand that you and the truth are not on speaking terms. You were authorized to bring fish, and fish only, into Rapture. Unauthorized contact with the outside world is dangerous. We will put a stop to it within the laws of Rapture. Fontaine looked at Ryan almost pityingly. You guys are imagining things. The only outside world I'm in touch with are a lot of fish. You can't call them closed mouth. Nah, but they're not telling tales about Rapture to anyone. I'm the one with a bone to pick, Ryan. I've heard rumors you're planning to ban plasmids. They're Rapture's most sought-after product. The people won't tolerate being depraved. Deprived of their addictions? Fontaine shrugged. Power's addictive. What do you know about that, Ryan? Ryan felt his hands clenching, blood rushing to his face, then he forced himself to relax and lean back. He shook his head and chuckled. Fontaine was smart. He'd hit a nerve. We're not going to ban all plasmids, but there are some I won't tolerate. Such as teleport. Too hard to keep people in Rapture? They can't teleport that far. Maybe just to a passing ship, and if Rapture is invaded, you'll lose all your assets. You know they'll find some excuse to seize everything. Now there you've got a point, Ryan. Fontaine lowered his voice and looked at Ryan earnestly. I'm not risking Rapture. Just know that much. I'm not letting anyone know we're here. I'm making a living, so I don't have to lean on plasmids too much. He said it like he was making an offer. Ryan figured Fontaine was indirectly telling him, I'm smuggling, but I'm not putting us at a risk. Stop worrying about my smuggling, and I'll go easy on marketing forbidden plasmids. That was a deal Ryan wasn't making. Ryan wondered if this was the moment to deal with Fontaine another way entirely. Maybe it wasn't in line with Rapture's philosophy to simply have Karlowski shoot him dead, but it'd save a damn lot of trouble. He was tempted. Still, there was the risk of what Reggie might do if Fontaine went down, and Fontaine's other men. He settled for an implied ultimatum. No smuggling, Fontaine, and no teleport. Fontaine's smile went crooked on his face. I'm finding teleport problematic too. People use it to get extra crazy. They're giving me problems. I got my own security issues. Security issues? You act as if you have your own little fiefdom here in Rapture. If I do, you gave it to me, Ryan, by deceiving people about what they'd find in your precious undersea utopia, by not providing for them once they got here. Everyone has a chance to earn their way, Ryan snapped back. Only parasites and slaves remain in their little dilemmas. Is that right? Their gazes locked. What exactly are you up to in that little sister's orphanage, Fontaine? Ryan asked. You barely take care of the boys in that other wing of the orphanage. It all seems to be about the girls. If you're using them for your little personal playthings. Fontaine's eyes flashed. What do you take me for? I'm like you. I like full-grown women. As for the orphanage, Fontaine went on blandly, we're just trying to give back to the community. He managed to say it with a straight face. Ryan snorted. I'll figure it out eventually. One thing I'm sure of, you're using that food for the poor charity to recruit people into your little syndicate. I've known mobsters to do the same thing. Mobsters. Fontaine took a step toward the desk. I don't have to stand for that. Ryan moved near the security alert button on the edge of his desk. Maybe this was the moment after all. What I'm here for, really, Fontaine said sharply, is to tell you that if you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. All that recruiting you're guessing about won't come and won't bite you in the ass if you back the fuck off. You respect strength, Ryan. Well, respect mine. I've got 6 more armed men out in the corridor. Now I'm leaving here now, so don't interfere with me. I won't distribute any new teleport, but there might be some other new plasmids, and you people are going to live with them, because I'm changing everything, Ryan. I'm changing it from the inside out, and no one can stop me. We can do this easy or the hard way. Fontaine beckoned to Reggie, and they stalked out of the room. Rapture Detention, 1956. They walked under the dimming lights of the cell block. Sullivan followed Redgrave and Candivish, their footsteps reverberating. Constable Redgrave was a medium-sized, wiry black man with a southern accent. He was vain of his white linen suit. Candivish spun a police truncheon and a thong as he watched along. The overhead lights spat a few sparks and guttered again. Water dripped down. There were shallow puddles in the metal hallway. "We're gonna get fucking electrocuted in here," Sullivan said. "Always a possibility," Cantovich said. "Tell your friend McDonough, got a lot of leaks now. Can't afford to lose any more men." Sullivan grunted to himself. "A lot of our best men transferred over to keep order in Persephone. Hear that Lamb woman is still up to some rabble-rousing. How she does it from jail, I don't know. Subversion's easier to deal with than getting electrocuted." The splicer just ahead of Cantovich reached out from the barred windows of his cell, screeching, "Electrocuted? Yeah, I hear you say you wanted to be electrocuted? To be punished for your crimes? Here I am, you bastards!" Electricity flickered along the splicer's arm and sputtered out. "Don't worry about that one," Cantovich said. "He's got no Eve left in him. Can't do anything with his atom." And Cantovich cracked the splicer's elbow hard with his truncheon. The impact made an ugly crunching sound, and the man jerked his arm back in, screeching in pain. "You broke it!" "You deserved it," Cantovich said, yawning as they passed onward. "Ah, there it is, number 29. As they strode out to the door, Sullivan hopped. The denizen of cell number 29 was ready to talk. Herv Manuela wasn't a splicer. He was quite sane. They caught him carrying a large box of contraband. He'd worked closely with Fontaine's man, Peach Wilkins of the fisheries. He was finally ready to make a plea deal, but he was still scared of crossing Fontaine. "Hey, Manuela," Sullivan called as Cantovich unlocked the door. Redgrave was standing to one side, using his white handkerchief to polish his chrome-plated revolver, whistling to himself. As they stepped through the open door, Sullivan could smell the putrefied blood. Herv Mandela was facing face down on the blood-splashed prison blues. He was missing most of his head. Strands of dark hair were glued to the wall by dry blood. It looked to Sullivan, his stomach lurching as he contemplated the mess, as if someone had grabbed Manila, and smashed his head so hard against the wall it simply exploded. Only splicers had the strength to do that. "Son of a bitch," Cantovich said. "Hey, Redgrave, look at that shit." Redgrave looked through the door and made a gagging face. "Oh Lord, that one's a bad mess, sure is. Who's done that, boss?" Sullivan turned away in disgust. "You didn't do this, Cavendish?" Cavendish was capable of something like that. He was strong and brutal. He might be pretending to be surprised. "Me? Hell no." "You definitely had the door locked." "Damn right it was locked. Hey, there's something else." He pointed at the opposite wall. Sullivan looked and saw the words written in blood. "The blood of the Lamb will cleanse us all. Her time will come. Love to all." "Lamb," Sullivan muttered. Ryan could jail the woman, but she was still a thorn in his side. He snorted, shaking his head. "Love to all." Olympus Heights, 1956. Jasmine Jolene had a very comfortable apartment in Olympus Heights, almost as close to the surface of the sea as the council's conference room. Sipping his martini, Ryan felt a certain pride. A chandelier gleamed. A picture window in the intricately framed skylight offered views into the sea. Turning to gaze out the broad window, Ryan could just make out the red of the sunset, the setting sun adding a muted crimson to the iridescent scales of a school of big bluefin tuna sweeping by. He glanced at the bedroom door, wondering what was keeping Jasmine. He left her lolling in the enormous pink plush bed with its pink satin headboard. There was a kitchen, a Frigidaire stocked with food, and a liquor cabinet with the best brandies and wines. Andrew Ryan had given Jasmine all this. He had provided for her. The small salary Sander Cohen gave her for her rather clumsy, poorly attended performances in the Fleet Hall would not have paid for much in the Artemis suites. But she earned her luxuries. Andrew Ryan saw to that, once or twice a month, and with some vigor for a man his age. He tightened his red silk bathrobe and sipped his martini. Feeling the alcohol, he frowned and put the drink down on the flamboyantly carved side table. That would have been his third martini. He hadn't been much of a drinker before coming to Rapture. He'd kept it to a minimum until recently, but it seems to be creeping up on him. The complainers had opportunities to make a good life in Rapture. They simply did not have the will to make use of them. Work 2 jobs, 3 if necessary, cut rations in half, squandering their Rapture dollars on Adam just to have an electrical joust with some drunk. What do you expect? But they always blamed him when they failed. The graffiti was still out there. Andrew Ryan doesn't own me. And Organize Artemis, The Collective Lives, Trust Lamb, and the enigmatic Who is Atlas? Slogans. It started with slogans, then it became communist revolutions. Mass murder of real working men by parasites. And indeed, who is Atlas? Sullivan's intel suggested the name was a pseudonym for something. Some red organizer, some would-be Stalin. Something was going out of balance. The top was spinning left, right, wobbling, about to fall. Andrew, darling, there's something I need to tell you. He turned to see Jasmine, looking rather more full-figured than usual in a pink negligee. She wore pink slippers with little gold puffs on the toes. She patted her golden hair nervously, though she'd already spent some considerable time brushing and grooming after their lovemaking. "What is it, my dear?" She licked her lips, and her gaze wandered restlessly to the big window. Her thick black eyelashes battered. She'd always blinked rather too much. There was something she wanted to tell him. He was afraid to, he realized. Come, Jasmine. I won't bite. What is it? Out with it. She chewed her lip, hesitated, started to say something, then shook her head. She looked around with a quiet desperation, then pointed at the corner of the window. Those snail things, or whatever they are. He looked at the lower edge of the window. Some spiny crustacean was creeping along a corner of the glass outside. "You wish to have your window cleaned of those things? I'll try to get a crew up here when you're at work. You know how they like to stare in at you when you're home." "I can tell where they're looking in those big, dark helmets. Scary old big daddies, I call them." "Is there something else you wanted to tell me, Jasmine?" She closed her eyes, pursed her lips, and shook her head. He could see she'd made up her mind not to tell him. Ryan opened his arms to her, and she came to him. He unfolded her in a warm embrace, and he gazed out the window, where the light was fading, the shadows of the deep rising with the coming of night. Thank you. That was part 12 of Bioshock Rapture. Thank you for listening, and good night.